Welcome to Frontlines of Social Good, the weekly news and views program from the Philanthropy Mastermind series. I'm Jay Frost. Today, we'll begin, as always, with the top 5 gifts of the week, and then a look at the headlines shaping philanthropy, fundraising, and social impact. Later, we'll turn to Chicago, where leaders from across the country gathered for the latest meeting of the Giving USA Foundation and the Giving Institute. Co-chair of that meeting, Johnny Cooper, founder and CEO of Cooper Coleman, joins the program to share an inside look at the discussions shaping philanthropy today, from the pressures facing nonprofit leaders to the growing needs in communities across the region. Together, we'll explore what's happening on the ground in Chicago, why it matters to fundraisers everywhere, and what these conversations reveal about the future of giving in America. Let's get started. Here are this week's top gifts. Number 5, $12 million from the estate of Nicholas and Agnes Renzi to the Central New York Community Foundation. The bequest establishes 2 endowed funds, the Renzi Charitable Fund and the Renzi Fund for Cortland County, and extends the foundation's community grants program to Cortland County for the first time, supporting local nonprofit grants, participatory budgeting, and expanded staffing. Number 4 this week, $16 million from Ann Simon, a longtime University of Maryland virology researcher. Her planned gift will create 2 endowed professorships in virology and plant RNA biology, multiple postdoctoral and graduate fellowships, and a scholarship in memory of her mother, strengthening UMD's research capacity in infectious disease and plant science. Number 3, $18 million from the Minders Foundation in memory of Oklahoma City philanthropist Herman Minders to Oklahoma City University. The gift, placed in the Herman Minders Endowment, will support scholarships and academic programs across the Minders School of Business, Kramer School of Nursing, and Wanda L. Bass School of Music, ensuring the continuation of Minders' transformative impact on OCU. Number 2 this week, $20 million from alumnus Samuel G. Rose to Dickinson College. The gift establishes the Jim Thorpe Center for the Futures of Native Peoples and the Samuel G. Rose Art Gallery, expanding Indigenous-led scholarship, culture, and community partnerships adjacent to the historic Carlisle Indian Industrial School site. And number 1 this week, $31 million from Dr. Alan and Charlotte Ginsberg to the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. Their gift will help accelerate translational research and clinical innovation at UCLA's new research park, advancing discoveries in neuroscience, ophthalmology, and regenerative medicine. Have we missed a big gift announcement this week? I'm sure that we have. Let us know by contacting me directly through LinkedIn or by email at j@donorsearch.net. Now for our top stories of the week. In Washington, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, found itself caught in the middle of a protracted federal budget standoff as lawmakers entered the 41st day of what has become the longest government shutdown in modern U.S. history. The shutdown began after Congress failed to pass appropriations to fund the government for the new fiscal year. Federal workers remain furloughed or unpaid, major programs are paused, and delays have rippled through federal services. Amid that chaos, 2 federal judges ordered the U.S. Department of Agriculture to keep SNAP payments flowing from contingency funds. But soon after, the Trump administration appealed, and the Supreme Court of the United States granted an emergency stay. Then, just yesterday, the Senate approved a funding package in a 60-40 vote that would reopen the government, sending the bill to the House and promising to end the shutdown. But the outcome is still contingent on House approval and presidential signature. In the meantime, the USDA has told states to, quote, undo any steps taken to issue full SNAP benefits for November 2025 if full files were already processed, leaving millions of beneficiaries uncertain whether they'll receive full, partial, or delayed payments. Nonprofit food banks and community partners are working to address these disruptions. Stay tuned for our interview with Julie Yurko, President and CEO of the Northern Illinois Food Bank, on the next episode of the PM Podcast, which drops this weekend. She'll provide an insider's view of how food banks have weathered this particular crisis. In Texas, a major legal clash erupted between the state's top law enforcement official and a prominent Latino civic engagement organization. The Ken Paxton office filed suit against Jolt Initiative, accusing the group of operating a, quote, unlawful voter registration scheme aimed at non-citizens. Jolt, in turn, fired back, alleging the suit is retaliatory and risks chilling Latino civic participation. The case highlights broader tensions over state scrutiny of nonprofit civic engagement work, with significant implications for organizations doing voter registration or outreach in historically underrepresented communities. Back on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., nonprofit leaders watched closely as Republican members of a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee used a hearing on political violence to advance what critics say are sweeping proposals that could broaden liability for advocacy-oriented nonprofits. According to Nonprofit Quarterly, the hearing included discussion of legislation backed by Senator Ted Cruz of Texas that would make it easier for the U.S. Department of Justice to bring RICO-style claims against organizations that support protests, bail funds, or legal defense services. Nonprofit advocates warn these proposals could chill advocacy, restrict how groups serve marginalized populations, and blur the line between legitimate civil society work and partisan enforcement. Meanwhile, a new report on nonprofit staff and organizational health delivered a hopeful message. Modest investments in people really do count. The National Council of Nonprofits, in its, quote, supporting nonprofit sector health through programming and staff well-being study, found that microgrants for staff retreats, mental health supports, paid time for reflection, and team development all produced measurable improvements in team resilience, retention, and program stability. For funders and organizations alike, the takeaway seems to be clear. The human side of nonprofit work, the people behind the mission, need support if the mission is going to thrive. In Philanthropy Arts Corner, a transformative initiative was recently announced, a coalition of 7 major foundations led by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and joined by the Ford Foundation, the Lennon Foundation, the Poetry Foundation, the John D. Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and the Hawthornden Foundation, as well as an anonymous foundation, launched the Literary Arts Fund, committing at least $50 million over 5 years to support nonprofit literary arts organizations and independent presses. The fund responds to data showing that literary nonprofit organizations receive less than 2% of U.S. arts funding, and according to Candid data, that those trends remain consistent. Applications open November 10, 2025, marking one of the largest coordinated philanthropic bets in the literary field in recent years. As the national spotlight turns once again to Chicago, a city long described as the city of big shoulders, the reality on the ground is anything but stable. In recent weeks, heavily armed federal immigration agents have staged what one outlet has described as an immense show of force, sweeping into neighborhoods with helicopters, unmarked vehicles, and tactical gear in an operation the Immigration and Customs Enforcement says targets criminal, undocumented immigrants. Meanwhile, community organizations, faith groups, and immigrants' rights coalitions have rallied in response, setting up hotlines, support networks, and neighborhood watch systems to help families facing uncertainty amid these raids. In this charged context, where the urgency is as human as it is political, my guest today steps into the conversation, and that is Johnny Cooper, founder and CEO of Cooper Coleman and co-chair of last week's gathering of the Giving USA Foundation and the Giving Institute in Chicago. He joins us to talk about how philanthropy, nonprofits, and community leadership are navigating this moment, and shares what he heard in the room, how donors and organizations are responding, and what the path forward looks like when the stakes feel higher than ever. Here is that conversation. Johnny, thank you so much for taking some time to talk again about the Giving Institute. You made some really interesting comments, really charged at the meeting, but many people don't even know what the Institute is all about. So maybe we can start there. You were the co-chair of the fall board meeting. What is the Giving Institute all about, and why was this meeting important to cover these topics?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Jay. I appreciate it. And It's been a privilege over the last few years to become a part of the Giving Institute, and we certainly stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. You being one of them, having been part of this for so long. Um, the way I look at the Giving Institute, and the reason I joined is because this is very much the brain trust of folks shaping philanthropy and generosity in the United States. The Giving USA Foundation, the Giving USA report notwithstanding, because that's like probably the most visible, output of this institution. The Giving Institute over the years has really transformed what philanthropy looks like today. And in a lot of ways, it's the reason we have development professionals employed by institutions. Before the Giving Institute and before these folks that came together, that didn't exist. It was paid solicitors for philanthropy, and so just um, I think there are countless other contributions that this body has made, but really for these people, all volunteers, to come together and to talk about what's relevant and how we can all check our competition at the door, because we are all competitive consultants to nonprofits. We check everything at the door and we come together and we put our heads together and we really talk about how can we all do better for our clients? How can we all do better for the sector? And how can we all do better for our businesses? Because, if our businesses don't run well, we can't deliver. We can't serve and show up for the sector the way they need us to as advisors. So I love the role that this organization plays. It's terrific to be a part of it, to get to know even more, because as we continue to peel the onion, or as I continue to peel the onion, as I get more involved, I'm just really blown away by the role this organization has played and how it's evolved over time.
This meeting was special for you, not just because you were co-chairing it, but also because you were a big advocate for these two main themes that were covered, especially one of them. Can you describe those and what you tried to cover in the meeting?
Sure, absolutely. It's easy to go into one of these meetings and try to boil the ocean, right? We want to talk about all of these different areas because there's so much that's relevant to our space at any given moment. But for us, we really wanted to, tackle two issues and dig deep into them, right? And so we looked at, of course, AI I think, will forever be a major priority going forward. But particularly because I think now more than ever, folks have really embraced AI, at least, in our circles, as a really important tool to use to the benefit of their clients, to the benefit of the sector, and then of course to our businesses as well. And so, focusing on AI as it evolves so quickly, was really important for us, because like even in the 2 days that we were together, who knows how much has changed, and the things that we learned from our speakers in terms of knowledge doubling every 12 hours. These are things that are just massively important to the work that we do, and and how we can really elevate the work that we're doing for the nonprofit sector through the consulting and advisory that these organizations provide. So AI was one bucket. The other bucket that was really, really important for me coming into this was the state of the sector effectively. I mean, I get it, that's a pretty catch-all kind of generic term, but today, everything's different. And it's different than it was yesterday, but it's certainly different than it was 11 months ago. And so many externalities have come to bear on the sector, not least of which is federal funding that's been cut, threats to institutions and how they're distributing funds, to whom they're distributing funds and what causes they're supporting. There's so much that has disrupted in a really profound way. And I'm not talking disruption from a positive standpoint. It was important that we sort of center that and bring that and discuss it, because everyone's really trying to navigate this current environment, and you know, at any given point, things are different than they were the day before, or, that morning. So,
That's
so those are
particularly
the
true in
two areas that we
Chicago,
just chose to
right?
focus on.
You're
I'm
you're in
sorry.
You're in Chicago, so it's particularly relevant there. I know you've had a strong recent federal presence, and that's affecting not just people in the streets of Chicago and the neighborhoods, but the nonprofit sector specifically.
Yeah, thank you for acknowledging that. And it was important to kind of bring that up when I opened the meeting last Thursday. We come together and we talk about all these really exciting things, you know, elevating generosity in the United States, like strengthening the systems that, work in philanthropy and throughout the sector, and then also just, you know, how we can do better as business leaders, right? Um, these are all exciting topics. It's fun to get together. There's always terrific energy. But outside the walls of that, meeting room that we were in, and throughout communities all around Chicagoland, but like beyond, all throughout the country, there are real things happening that are devastating to people. And so, I thought it was important to acknowledge that and to sort of bring that into the room, because that's a reality that we have to hold as well. And if we're not, I think it's just unfortunate, and it would be a disservice to the sector. People are experiencing some of the worst human rights violations uh, of our lifetimes in Chicago, throughout the country right now, um, with all this ICE activity that's happening. Um, Families and communities and people they're just living in fear, and day in and day out, and they have been for months. And so, how does that affect all of the work that we do? Because it's really kind of it trickles down, right? If people are afraid to leave their homes because they're at risk of being abducted, whether you're a U.S. citizen or not, because of the color of your skin, you're not going to work. Your children aren't going to school. You're not doing the things that you would otherwise do to contribute to society in a meaningful way. And all of those things trickle down. Services are not being utilized to the extent that they need to. People aren't doing it, any number of things that they would otherwise do. But then think about it on the user side, right? If folks are afraid to leave their houses to go to the grocery store, how are they getting food on the table? And so they start reaching out to organizations to find that support, to find that aid, to find somebody who can bring food to their home or get them somewhere safely. And that draws on the resources of any number of nonprofits in this sector. It draws on the finances of the funders who are funding these sort of, ad hoc or emergency programs. Um, the impact of all of this activity is endless, and it's really devastating. Uh, the nice thing is people are showing up, and that's the beauty of this sector. That's the beauty of, sort of the community and the resolve in Chicago and other communities. But um, my goodness, like, yeah, the impact is vast, and I don't even know if we could ever really like characterize or like the extent of it, I would say.
I have to ask you about a conversation you had in the middle of the day with the head of the Chicago Community Foundation, which is now 6 billion, I think, in assets, and they've undertaken some of those emergency actions both independently, but also as kind of a convener or organizer of philanthropy efforts to address arising needs. Um, First of all, what was that conversation like, and what are some of the things that she conveyed that you think are relevant, not just in Chicago, but nationally, as nonprofits think about how do they go and access those resources to address maybe a need that's arising right now in their community?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That was a really, really Terrific conversation for me. And I think for, based on the feedback, hearing the perspective of someone. So it was Andrea Sines, who's the CEO of the Chicago Community Trust, and you're absolutely right. So they have 6 billion in funds under management, 1,900 donor advised funds, and I think they've got 1,700,000,000 of their own endowment that they distribute throughout the community. So they're really a powerful force in philanthropy, not just locally, because they do serve pretty much exclusively Chicago, but they're the third or fourth on any given day, the third or fourth largest community foundation in the country. And so what they're doing is inherently, you know, uh, observed, by other organizations as leaders. And so, you know, Andrea made a lot of really great points, and I think what I really appreciated was sort of her response to the question, how is your guidance changing for donors and philanthropies who are coming to you and saying, what do we do? What do we do next? I'm going to sum it up, or distill it rather, in a few high level points, if I remember correctly. So um, give more, uh, give with fewer restrictions, and combine your resources. So what her message was to funders was, dig deeper, right? Which is really, really important because the resources are needed in ways they never have been before. She shared a really great example about the Resilient Chicago Fund, which is the new donor collaborative there. Um, and um, and then, give with fewer restrictions, remove the red tape. Like, I think the term trust-based philanthropy means so many things to so many different people. So like, it's tough to kind of use that term, but really, the fundamentals there are eliminate the steps an organization has to take to get the money, get the grants, and then report on them. So for her, it's remove that red tape, deploy the resources, put them to work. These organizations out in the field know what's needed. They're on the ground, but things are changing every day. We have to be able to mobilize those in a moment's notice. So remove the red tape, and then and I think one of our other points is combine your resources. They've been creating more and more donor collaborative funds where they're bringing together funders from all over who could otherwise give independently, but by pooling their resources and the trust kind of guiding some of that work because of their proximity to the work on the ground, they can make so much more of an impact and an immediate impact with those dollars, rather than all of those donors saying, sure, we can go out there and see what's happening on the ground. Let us do this, do that, where we can put them together and let that do the work for us. So, there's a big trend across philanthropy in terms of, donor collaboratives. There are a ton in terms of like violence prevention, uh, uh, food insecurity, like you name it. They're out there. I don't think they get a lot of airtime, but they're really profound. We've had the privilege of working with a few donor collaboratives recently, and it's just amazing to see some of the biggest philanthropies come together and put some serious weight behind these solutions and putting these resources into communities.
I did want to ask you about that. At one level, this is a conversation about the Giving Institute and the meetings the conversations that you held there. But at another level, you're a Chicagoan. This is your city. You're experiencing these things along with everybody else in Chicago. It's a big place. It's a place with resources, but also with needs, and lots of nonprofits that are addressing those needs and need those resources to do it. What's it like being in the middle of all that, and then seeing how both philanthropy and the practitioners, the nonprofits that do the work, are coming together? How does that make you feel as a Chicagoan?
Really proud, honestly. It's I don't feel like I'm in the center of it. I feel like that's my own thing, right? I'm really trying to like grapple with like what can I do more of? Because I'm not on the ground anymore. I'm not in the nonprofit, like, serving the community. I'm supporting the sector in a different way, like, kind of, a step removed as a consultant, but seeing the folks do the work on the ground and like knowing these folks who are doing this work and hearing about what they're doing, hearing about what other folks are doing that I was never aware of. It's just remarkable. And it's really moving. It really is. The amount of sort of negative press that Chicago gets, it's absurd. Um, what people see on the news, and it is not the reality here. Sure, like every city, every major city, and this is what second or third largest city in the country, um, has their problems. What I've not experienced in other cities is sort of that community and resilience that I have to the extent that that I've seen it in Chicago. Now, I've also been in Chicago at the most sort of desperate time for that kind of resilience and community, right? Um, but my goodness, the people that come together and what they're doing to show up for one another, it's not much different than what we're seeing from other communities, other cities. But it's really profound to know that I'm part of this, you know, I'm part of this like city of people who look out for one another. And I walk through my neighborhood and I see signs that say, like, I don't know the words that they're using, but like, we're a safe haven for immigrants, right? Um, People are willing to take people they don't know in and protect them from, their exposure to these ice raids. Uh, that's not something you see everywhere. But in such a densely populated area, people like, and we're seeing this in real time. We're seeing these ICE agents come into our communities and take people, and you hear it. You can't go down the street without hearing whistles, which is this new response. I don't know if you've heard this, but someone in LA started this, and then somebody in Chicago adopted it, and I think other communities everywhere have it. But you go to like our local bookstore on the corner here is distributing them. People are distributing whistles with a little printout, and it's basically saying this is how we can mobilize against ICE. There's a long whistle and a few short whistles. One indicates that there's ICE activity happening right now, and or they're present, and then a longer whistle I think indicates that like show up because something is happening and they're harassing or assaulting someone right now. And so I've seen the community come around with their whistles and just draw attention to everyone around, and surround the activity that's happening. It's just really remarkable how, just a little idea can turn into something that's actually driving these agents out of these neighborhoods, like quite literally pushing them out. It's remarkable. You're seeing it on Instagram, you see it on Twitter and TikTok. Um, Seeing it in real life is just a wildly different experience, and that makes me proud.
I'm going to ask you something that sounds like it's a totally different subject, but I imagine that there must be a very, very short connection line between the two. You work in the area of talent, and there's a lot of kind of battle for fundraising talent, for
Mhm.
nonprofit talent. Um, are you finding it harder or easier to find people not just who are qualified, but who are passionate about the work, given how much need there is for people to be involved in their communities, whatever the issues are, wherever they
Mhm.
are, but especially in places like the Midwest and the big cities around the country? Is this what is it like to be searching for and recruiting talent at a time like this?
So I think it's a much thanks for the question. That's something. that we really need to like zoom out on, because it's really hard. The talent space is really difficult right now. Sure, there's a lot of talent out there. There's a lot of need. Um, and some of the most talented folks are really coveted by organizations. But what I've been experiencing is this reticence for anyone to, for candidates to be actively on the market or consider, if they're a passive candidate, consider our outreach. And what I mean by zooming out is it's not just the ICE activity, it's not just the economic activity, it's everything combined. It's I made a comment last week. When I was talking to Andrea, there's so many unknowns, so much uncertainty. But I think the thing that we can all agree on is that uncertainty in this administration, in this moment, has become known for us. And that uncertainty is leading people to balk at a new job opportunity if they have stability, right? If you're in a stable job, why would you upend that and take the risk of going to a new organization in a time where everything is uncertain, right? Economically, from a safety standpoint, socially, that's what I've been seeing as I think one of the most difficult barriers to like the talent environment right now. Like getting people to consider a move. Why would you take that risk?
So, given all that, and especially coming out of this meeting, what gives you the most hope as you think about not just the environment and your work, but also hanging around with colleagues who are all working on this day in, day out, just like you are? What's giving you the most hope for the future for philanthropy and fundraising?
I think, my first answer to that question is the conversation with Andrea. And I think a lot of folks who left there felt that, right? We're all operating up here with leadership at organizations, fundraisers, et cetera. Our proximity to what's going on the ground is far more, um, you know, like exposed than we ever will be. She and her team are working with organizations day in and day out. That's the hope. Hearing about the things that they're doing, hearing how they're deploying funds in ways they never have before, that's the hope, right? If they can do that as a $6 billion community foundation, influencing 1,900 donor advised funds, so ostensibly 1,900 families who may have deaths elsewhere as well, who take what they've learned and they're deploying those dollars in other communities as well. Uh, if they can do this and inspire other community foundations, like that's scale. That's the hope. That's the excitement for me, because there's only so much that we can do as consultants when we're advising organizations. Usually the outputs and the outcomes are like distant, and so to see all of this response, I think it's just really exciting. It and I think they're getting better and better at it. Coming out, like going through COVID, a lot of these organizations had to figure out how to pivot and how to do things better and more quickly to show up. This is yet another example. And I think there's so many learnings that have come over the last 5 years that they can do this in a much more, deliberate way, having learned, lessons through that. So my first answer is hearing from people on the ground, like Andrea and her team. And I think, the other part of it is just being in the community of the Giving Institute. Nobody had to be in that room, right? In fact, everybody paid to be there, paying like to fly there, to stay at the hotel, to register, but also the like lost billable hours of being in a room for a day and a half and traveling, right? People make sacrifices to be a part of this organization, to bring their skills and experience to bear on this sector, because we all see so much opportunity. for me, that's hope too, right? And as we add more members to the Giving Institute and see more people get involved in committees you know like ad hoc groups like the Giving Commission or the Generosity Commission, excuse me, um, that's amazing. We're everyone is doing so much more than they need to do because it's important, it's necessary, and it's nice to be in a room of people who just show up where they need to.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jay.
My thanks again to Johnny for sharing his experience both with the Giving Institute, but also specifically to the experience being in Chicago and doing this work in a very challenging time. Coming up next in the Philanthropy Mastermind series, this Thursday, November 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern, on our How to Raise show, which is CFRE accredited, Brantley Boyette, president of Giving Docs, who is also at the meeting in Chicago, reveals how AI-powered fundraising is transforming planned giving, helping fundraisers identify legacy prospects, strengthen stewardship, and keep relationships deeply personal in an age of artificial intelligence. You don't want to miss that one. This weekend, the PM Podcast presents a conversation with Julie Yurko. I referenced that earlier during the news segment. She is the president and CEO of the Northern Illinois Food Bank. With food insecurity rising and SNAP benefits facing cuts and delays, Julie offers a powerful personal reflection on leadership and resilience when nonprofits are truly on the front lines. And if you missed last week's episodes, be sure to check out Challenge and Opportunity, Leaders in Healthcare Philanthropy, featuring a true cast of stars: Nancy Busani, Julie Cox, John Drake, David Flood, Bill Littlejohn, and Birgit Stumpf, as well as Set Your Campaign Up for Success, a session we had with Amy Eisenstein on building your pre-campaign strategy from the ground up. And of course, this program, Frontlines of Social Good, those episodes are all available for you as well as the other programs on the website of our sponsor, DonorSearch, at donorsearch.net. And you can see more about that under the resources tab, as well as right within the show notes of this program if you're watching on YouTube. Once again, thanks for watching. I'm Jay Frost, and as always, take care and do good.